Same age, same income, same starting balance. 10 years ago, Tom switched to an industry super fund. Josh didn't.
So chances are you've seen ads like this on the television before, showing you the difference in your superannuation balance after making the switch to an industry super fund. But even after choosing an industry super fund, did you know that there's one key decision that you have to make that could be the difference between you retiring with an extra $100,000? This video will be broken up into 5 different sections, where by the 4th part of the video, you'll know exactly what decision you have to make. But if you stay till the last part, then I'll share a resource with you that breaks down all the numbers for every superannuation fund, so that no matter which fund you're with personally, you'll know the correct decision that you'll need to make to ensure that you can retire with more money. Now, the first part of this video is about the different investment options, which, spoiler alert, is the key decision that you'll need to make later on in the video. Now, all superannuation funds will generally offer 2 different investment options: a diversified or pre-mixed investment option, or a do-it-yourself investment option. Pre-mixed investment options invest in a variety of different assets and are actively managed by fund managers, and so the option suits those who aren't very knowledgeable with investments and simply want to rely on the expertise on the fund managers themselves. Super funds will generally have the following different pre-mixed investment options, which are generally sorted from least risky to most risky, and would be a combination of both growth assets and defensive assets. DIY investments are for those people who generally want a little bit more flexibility with the different investment allocations between the various different assets. With this, you essentially have a few different assets that you can choose from, ranging from shares, properties, bonds, and cash. Some funds may also offer a life cycle investment, which essentially uses pre-mixed investments, but automatically switches you to a lower risk option as you approach retirement. An example of what a life cycle option might look like is from Aware Super. When you're 55 and under, your portfolio will be completely invested in the high growth option. Then, as you near retirement, it slowly shifts the balance to a balanced portfolio, before finally being 100% in a conservative option, which is made up of 50 to 70% in defensive assets once you reach retirement. So now that we understand the various different investment options, I guess the next logical question is, what are the main differences between them? Besides the different asset allocations, there are generally 2 main differences. And the first one is the management style between the investment options. You see, you can either have an actively managed investment or a passively managed investment. Active management involves the fund manager actively buying and selling assets in an attempt to beat the market benchmark. Whereas with a passive management approach, all that fund is trying to do is pretty much track the performance of a specific index. You can usually tell whether an investment option is active or passive based on the investment description and the objective that they're trying to achieve. For example, Australian Super's high growth pre-mixed investment option has the investment objective to beat CPI, which is inflation, by more than 4.5% over the medium to long term. So I guess the next logical question is, which one of these investment styles is better? Now, you might think that the active management style is better. After all, you've got the fund manager and all the researchers who have 10 to 20 years worth of experience buying and selling assets to optimize your portfolio. But there was a new report overseas that found that nearly 80% of active fund managers are falling behind the major indexes. And to show that it's not just happening overseas, there was another report done in Australia that showed that 84% of active fund managers underperformed the Australian market over the past 15 years. Now, the second main difference between the 2 investment options are the fees. Now, when it comes to the fees associated with superannuation, there are a lot, but they can generally be categorized into 4 common categories. We have admin fees. This is the cost of maintaining the infrastructure of the super fund. Investment fees is the cost of managing an investment option. Transaction costs include the buying and selling of different assets. And finally, insurance fees. Now, this is the cost of having different types of insurance covers in your superannuation fund. Now, out of all of these different fees, the only one that you really have control over is the fees that you're paying in relation to your insurance. If you decide to take out fees within your superannuation, then you'll incur fees, but it's not mandatory. Personally, I don't have any insurance within my superannuation, so I don't pay these fees. Admin fees are also generally going to be the same, regardless of what investment option you choose. But when it comes to the investment fee and the transaction costs, this is where the main difference comes between the different investment options. With an active management style, you have the salary from the fund manager, you have the salary from the researchers that you have to pay for, meaning your investment fees are going to be significantly higher because that's the cost of managing your investments. That fund manager is also going to be buying and selling different assets, meaning there's also going to be more transaction costs involved. Whereas with a passive management style, because it's just tracking an index, there's significantly less overheads with regards to managing that investment. And typically it will have lower transaction costs because it isn't going to be actively buying and selling different assets. So to summarize, there's two main differences. Firstly, it's the management style, which research suggests that an active management style often does not beat a passive approach. And secondly, the fees associated with an active management style tend to be higher than a passive approach. Now, hopefully the answer is becoming clearer for you, but to make it even more clear, let's next talk about the impact that fees have on your superannuation balance. And I think that this is best done with an example. Suppose a 30-year-old who has an income of $100,000 with a super contribution rate of 12%, a starting balance of $50,000, and they plan to retire at 65 years old. Suppose they have a choice between two funds, where both have an admin fee of $74, but one has an investment fee of 0.2%, while the other has an investment fee of 1.2%. Now, let's also assume that both funds have an annualized return of 7.5% per year. Now, adjusted for inflation, we would have a final balance of just over $700,000 in the case of the 0.2% fee, and a final balance of $580,000 when we have an investment fee of 1.2%. That's a difference of over $120,000 at retirement. Now, keep in mind that we didn't even take into account any increases in income over time that would have naturally occurred, nor did we factor in any extra super contributions that we might have made later on in life, which would have just further magnified the effects of the fees. So the decision that you have to make after signing up for an industry super fund is to choose an investment option with a passive investment style, because not only are you going to be paying significantly less in fees, but more often than not, they'll actually outperform a fund that adopts an active management style. Now, some superannuation funds do actually offer a pre-mixed passive investment option, such as Host Plus's indexed high growth option, which is made up of 100% growth assets. But other superannuation funds don't, or perhaps they offer an asset allocation which might not be what you're after. For example, Australian Super offers an indexed diversified pre-mixed option, but at 25% of the portfolio is made up of fixed interest, which I personally wouldn't want in my portfolio. So oftentimes you're going to need to go down the route of a DIY investment option, and then pick out the various indexed investment options and choosing your own asset allocation. Oftentimes your options with a DIY investment approach are limited, which is actually good, because if you have too much choice, then it might lead to analysis paralysis. Your options will typically include an Australian equities option, international equities, some form of fixed interest, and cash as well. It's then up to you to choose the asset allocation between these different assets. Now, I've actually done a full video talking about what the optimal asset allocation is between Australian and international shares. So if you want to check out that video, make sure to click up here after. Now finally, the final part of this video is a superannuation comparison, specifically a comparison between the various different fees across the different investment options offered by some of the most popular superannuation funds. Now before I show you this, if you have learned anything new along the way, make sure to hit that like button down below because it really does help out the channel. Now this super comparison worksheet that I have on the screen here gives a comparison between the various different fees across the various different investment options for some of the most popular superannuation funds. Now this wasn't actually created by me, but actually by a user by the name of Swanky Koala. Shout out to him, and I'll leave a link to this in the description box down below. Now if you go into the first tab of the workbook, these are the fees for a DIY investment approach that is made up of an allocation of 40% Australian shares and 60% international shares. You can then also select the management style between active and passive. So in this situation, we'll select passive, and then you'll see a breakdown of all the various different funds that offer a passive management style. And then you'll also see all of the fees and a breakdown of them that you'll need to pay. So we have the admin fees, and then also the investment fees, and then how much in fees you'd be expected to pay each year based on your superannuation balance. So for example, with Rest, if you had a balance of over $500,000, then you would be expected to pay $378 in fees per year. The second tab also shows you the fees that you have to pay for a pre-mixed high growth option. And to do a quick comparison between the fees, if I looked at the active management style and looked up the fees for Rest, I'd be expected to pay over $3,300 in fees for a balance of over $500,000. Which means by going with the DIY option, I'm saving nearly $3,000 in fees or paying almost 10 times less compared to the pre-mixed high growth option. Now the asset allocation between the two will be different, so it's not a true apples to apples comparison, but the pre-mixed investment option is also actively managed, which we now know oftentimes doesn't actually outperform a passive management style. If you're also interested in the historical performance of a specific fund and investment option, then it's also there for you to see as well. Now, if you've made it this far in the video and you've enjoyed the video or have learned anything new, make sure to leave me a comment with the word passive in it so I know that you're one of the legends who have watched all the way. Now, if you're interested in knowing what the average superannuation balance is by age, then make sure you check out this video right here.